In this video, we will cover application level settings within Buyout that you will want to review and configure before using Buyout. So we'll start by starting the Buyout application. Provide login credentials, in this case for Sage 300 Construction and Real Estate, since that is what we are connecting to. Once connected to the databases, we'll click on the File menu and go to Buyout Options. On the first tab is where we can select some defaults for the From Company and From Contract or Contact for documents that would be created later, such as requests for quotes and purchase orders and whatnot when we get to that point. The next tab, probably one of the most important areas to review and configure, would be import settings. And this pertains to the import of items from Sage Estimating. So when we import an estimate from Sage Estimating, it of course is going to pull in all of the items associated with the estimate. This controls what else Buyout may automatically do for you in conjunction with that. So the first option is to keep pre-selected vendors and pricing. So if the item identifies a vendor already, based on your estimating process, you might have already identified who the vendor should be. Buyout will retain that, and what will happen is Buyout will automatically set up a quote for that vendor in its respective quote group with the pricing that was appearing with the estimate. Automatically create quotes based on stored pricing is another means of sort of automating your Buyout process. So Buyout allows you to store pricing that you've gathered previously from vendors, and if in the import of a given item, for example, Buyout finds that we already have pricing for that item from one or more vendors, then it will automatically create quotes for each vendor that we have pricing from, again within the respective quote group. So that just automates that process of selecting and identifying potential vendors based on which vendors we may already have pricing for. The next set of options has to do with the types of items that we are going to import. By default, material and subcontract are selected. That is consistent with how the 1X version of Buyout worked, which did not support the use of labor, equipment, and other. You do have the option of selecting labor and equipment and other if that makes sense in your Buyout process. The example would be needing to write purchase orders or subcontracts for the rental of equipment, for example. So those are certainly options that you can leverage. Next to that, you'll see a drop-down box for the creation of quote groups. So this is an important option if you're going to make use of the checkboxes at the top. In other words, in order for these top two checkboxes to work, there has to be a quote group assigned to the item. And to do that, we can have Buyout automatically assign the quote group based on some criteria. Now, if we don't use this option, what will happen is once the estimate's been imported, you would then need to go through and manually assign items to their respective quote groups for the purposes of soliciting pricing and quotes and whatnot. So I'm going to say that for material, I want to assign quote groups based on the bill of materials class. Let's say the bill of materials description rather. Okay. Now you'll notice that as soon as I did that, another drop down appeared to the right of that. So I can actually create quote groups based on the combination of multiple fields from the estimate. So just as a simple example, let's say that I wanted to create quote groups for subcontractors based maybe on group, phase code, and location. So the combination of those two values would constitute a quote group that would be automatically created for subcontract items, and those subcontract items would be automatically assigned to those quote groups. Okay. and then only create quote groups for items with pre-selected vendors. I think that's self-explanatory, but if we check that, then that's only going to apply to those vendors where we do already have pre-selected pricing. Okay, so again, this is just a means of automating the process of what happens, when we import an estimate, so that we don't have to do everything manually. So that things can be assigned for us up front automatically. Quotes can be automatically set up for us based on stored pricing, and that should streamline and make the buyout process a little bit more efficient. Quote settings, so we can automatically select the lowest quote. That's settings similar to what was in the 1X product, as well as the default number of days and time that quotes are due back and whatnot. And then of course rounding options for reports that are generated. Okay, so with those options set, we'll click OK. And then we'll go back to the File menu, go to Operations Settings, or Operations Options. This set of options is going to be specific to the particular operations system or ERP system that we are connecting to. In this case, in my example, we're connecting to Sage 300 Construction and Real Estate. So the set of options that I'll see pertain to Sage 300. The set of options I would see for Sage 100 will be slightly different. So I'll click on that. And what this has to do with primarily at this point is the assignment of commitment numbers in job cost or in purchasing. So the first option is use system assigned commitment IDs. If this box is unchecked, then Buyout will require the user to enter the commitment number that is going to be used when generating that commitment, or for generating each and every commitment. So that would become a requirement in terms of data entry for the user to manually assign commitment numbers that are unused, that are unique for each new commitment that's going to be generated. If we check this box, then the assignment of commitment numbers can be automated. And I'll come back to these options here in a moment. Let's talk about the system generated ID first. So with this box checked, these options at the bottom here light up and become enabled. And so I can see that I can sort of design the format of the commitment number based on some options I have here. So for example, if I wanted subcontracts to be prefixed with SC dash, I can do that, and this shows me an example of what that might look like with my data. The particular job number that it's using in its example is coming from the database based on the last job that was updated in Sage. So it kind of gives me a clear idea of what to expect based on real data. I can choose to include the job number or not. I can also choose to include a separator character in there or not, or what character that's going to be, such as that, as well as the number of sequential digits that appears at the end. Do keep in mind that Sage 300 has a limitation of 12 characters for the commitment number. So just pay attention to that and make sure that we're not exceeding that, because if you do exceed that, of course it's not going to pass validation and it's going to be kicked back as an invalid commitment number. Okay. You also have the option to include punctuation. So if you have separator characters in your job number in Sage, like that, so 03-015, you can include those or not. And again, this is just based on the format of your job numbers in Sage. So this is showing sample data, but your job numbers may look very different based on how you have formatted your job numbers. Okay, and these options all apply to subcontracts. Separately, for purchase order type commitments, we have the same set of options, and again, we can customize those accordingly. So if we wanted those to be like PO for purchase order, to keep those distinct, we can do that. Otherwise, we have the same set of options available for POs. Also, for both of these, under commitment creation, we can choose to automatically commit or not. Basically, what that means is if we don't automatically commit, then when the commitment gets created in job costs, what's happening is it's creating the commitment record and its commitment item records but nothing else is being updated. So if we were to then look at the job totals, for example, to see the total amount that's been committed, those numbers would not have changed. If we commit the commitment, then job cost creates committed cost transactions that post and update those totals on the job record and cost code records and so forth. So it's kind of like an approval status or a completed status in the respect that if that's not committed, it's not part of our totals. If it is committed, then it is part of our totals elsewhere in job cost. So you have that option, to indicate to buyout whether you want it to automatically create or automatically commit the commitments when it creates them or not. This next checkbox is actually not implemented yet in the beta version, but what this pertains to is the level of detail that we will see in Sage 300. So in the example where you might have many items in your estimate on a given quote, and we're now committing that quote and creating a commitment, the challenge for some users is that a commitment that has lots and lots of line items becomes a workflow challenge when they are recording an accounts payable invoice, because when recording the invoice, accounts payable will require the invoice to be distributed out to each one of those individual items. And the feedback from some customers is that that's not necessary if all of the items pertain to, say, the same cost code and category, or maybe just a handful of cost codes and categories as well. So this option allows us to sort of collapse that detail down and summarize it by job, extra, cost code, and category, in which case we sort of, in job costing, we lose that detail. But again, some customers may choose that because it makes their workflow process more manageable as far as being able to enter accounts payable invoices and not have to spread the invoice out to 100 line items. Instead, it might just be one or a few line items. When that option is selected, once this is implemented, the description for those commitment items will simply be based on the cost code. So again, we'll lose that level of detail where the description would have otherwise been the description that came from the quote. Also, the destination. We have two possible destinations with Sage 300 construction and real estate, one being job cost and the other being purchasing. So right now, only job cost is implemented. Purchasing is not yet implemented in the beta version. That will be implemented soon in order to have parity with the 1X product. Also keep in mind that once purchasing is implemented, the flow of the data anyway is that the commitment would go to purchasing, and then purchasing is going to end up sending that to job cost as a commitment anyway. But that's what the flow of that data would look like. But the purpose of writing it through purchasing may be to take advantage of some of the other features of the purchasing module, as far as generating purchase order documents and things of that nature. Also, just to clear up any misconceptions as well, read job cost as being essentially the same as job cost / PJ. So certainly from within the project management application in Sage 300, you have visibility of commitments. I believe you can even enter commitments there as well. But that data is actually still stored in the job cost master file in the job cost set of tables. Even though you might see it in the project management application, it's still job cost commitments. So hence why you do not see a separate option for project management, because it's really the same destination regardless. So if this were the Sage 100 set of options, this window is going to look almost identical, with a couple of exceptions, which I'll point out. One is there's no auto commit option. There will be this combine option for job, phase, cost code, and category. There'll be no destination option. The system generated ID will be almost the same. except that you will not see an option for punctuation, since Sage 100 does not have punctuation in the job numbers. Also, there'll be another option within the system generated ID in that we have the option of simply allowing Sage 100 to assign the next ID. So what happens in that context is if we select that option, then Buyout does not assign a subcontract number or purchase order number, as the case may be. It simply leaves that blank, and then Sage 100 fills that in with its next available number. And then we retrieve that number back and update Buyout with whatever number Sage 100 applied. So basically with Sage 100 anyway, there are two options for system generated ID. Either the Buyout system generates it or the Sage 100 system generates it. So you'd see those radio buttons in the Sage 100 configuration screen. Okay, so that is everything in this video as far as these application level settings that we would want to configure up front. So in the next video we will begin talking about Buyout packages.